Okay, so we thought there was something a little different this weekend. We're going to talk about the different podcasts we've done, and there was someone I used to work with named Furman, and he told me once, you go to work to have fun, and podcasting is work. So we're going to talk about all the fun we had here at a podcast between Sal the Agorist and Ezra on Liberty, um, and everything else we've done. So what do you think is your favorite segment so far that we've podcasted?
That's a tough one. Um, I'm very enamored with the young Ezra and the wisdom that he obviously has beyond his years,
Yeah,
and how embraced he is with his structure of what liberty is all about. So we disagree on certain aspects. Obviously, you and me both want to disregard the political scheme, and but what I love about it is he got to learn something, we got to learn more, and we got to have a discussion. I mean, we even went as far as going deep into the reaches of history,
yeah,
and why too much government, too much regulation, too much policing power, and too much forgetfulness of what we as individuals have can lead to so much atrocity and tyranny. And I mean, it was amazing discussion. It was awesome to hear his perspective, especially as young that he is. I don't know his actual age, obviously, but like I said, wise beyond your years, and enamored with the roots of liberty, and the pathway that we have to take in order to achieve full
yeah,
blown liberty. And I love that he's very open to the agorist ideals in practice, but he's still holding on to that element that maybe maybe a little bit of government to a certain extent on a more localized level could be the path that we choose in order to finally break away from the state altogether. So
yeah,
maybe we need a New Hampshire.
yeah.
Who knows? And that's what I gather. Maybe we need the free state of New Hampshire, and then through that we can counter that government with the market.
Well, Roger Ver, that's where he first learned about Bitcoin was a Free State Project.
Mm-hmm.
So even in the seeds of that very minimalistic perspective
Mm-hmm.
through the strength of anarchy through the financial system. Speaking of financial systems, I think one of my favorite personal points of reference for specifically for our podcast, not for the YouTube channel, but for our podcast, would be the legendary promo you cut on the history of the financial system in Europe. I mean, that thing, you went for like, what, 15, 20 minutes, just straight dropping knowledge. You know, you're
I
very
wouldn't
informed on that matter.
I wouldn't say I was dropping knowledge. It's just more just reading and taking certain segments. I wasn't giving you the whole history. I mean, when
It
it all
was
comes
pretty
down,
steep, is what I'm saying.
well, yeah, but I mean, when it all comes down to it, I mean, I hear murmurs, I read off of message boards and even Twitter or whatever, so any form of social media. I mean,
Yeah,
and you always hear about the families. You always hear
yeah,
about the matter of the number 13, and there are 13 major families throughout the history for the last few centuries that are enamored within the political structure of the world, specifically Europe, and total domination within the financial sector. But when it comes to it, the other 12 are meaningless. They're trivial.
yeah,
And I've studied and read about the Rothschilds. I've watched documentaries pertaining towards the Rothschilds.
yeah,
I am enamored to the whole dichotomy of what the Napoleonic Wars, or the Wars of the Coalition is what it's really termed. The Wars of the Coalitions against Napoleon's France. After the French Revolution, what the French Revolution, what the stakes of the French Revolution brought to the table. The fact of the matter is if you look into history, into the late Enlightenment era of the latter half of the 18th century, um, the French Revolution, it takes its roots towards the success of the American version of their revolution, which is more honestly, which was more of a civil war and a fight to divorce from Great Britain, create our own nation. The French weren't that. The French were remove the hierarchy, remove the heretical. I think I said that right. Yeah, the heretical absolute monarchy, and basically give the power to the people. But what does that actually look like? The French Revolution is could be very comparable towards what the 1917 Russian Revolution and then consequential civil wars of 1918 to 1922 was. It
Yeah.
was, I mean, it was a socialist movement. And through that brought about Napoleon, who took advantage and rose to the ranks within the French army, successfully achieved power, reunified France, became king, coronated himself the emperor of the French, and the story goes from there. I mean, the consolidation that he brings, even though he himself was a tyrant, the whole idea around the coalition was France was essentially controlled by Rome because they
Yeah.
were still relatively Catholic, and but yet the true superpower was Great Britain for other means, more status, political, and economical, naval growth of Britain throughout the last century, and so Rome needed to contain Napoleon. The other Catholic monarchies needed to contain Napoleon. Napoleon was consolidating power in France. Napoleon essentially freed Spain from Catholic monarchy for the time being. Actually, it was his brother or brother-in-law that was installed as the Spanish king. He did some good things with Germany, consolidating the former uh, Holy Roman Empire that collapsed and reforming the the many principalities and duchies and different states and unifying them and what would eventually become the German Empire under Bismarck and Bismarck's role as prime minister with Prussia. I
Yeah.
mean, so the rise of the Roman Empire began with Napoleon, or Roman Empire, excuse me. The rise of the German Empire, the Prussian-bound empire, which again took elements of socialism as well with
Yeah.
Bismarck, um, began with Napoleon. He was changing the order of Europe, and the order of Europe was Great Britain at the forefront of the financial and economic structure, and Rome still lagging away with some a tad bit of some control because most of the other monarchies were still attached to the Catholicist regime of the day. Spain at one point, Austro-Hungarian Empire, etc., etc. You had the Russians that were moving in, so the order was shifting, and Napoleon was at the forefront of that, and the family, the Rothschilds, who essentially consolidated their own influence, their own power within England with the setup of the Bank of England, was waning.
Yeah.
So they took advantage of the coalition war. They funded these coalitions. They funded Britain, who funded the coalition. Britain funded all these wars through monetarily. There was no real. They didn't. They didn't officially get into the land embattlement until the later coalition wars, when they kind of had to because of failure. And I mean, and because Napoleon's tactics were revolutionary, I
Yeah.
mean, for what they were, and for in fact, most of the tactics were from the Napoleonic Wars used by Napoleon's armies were seen again in the American Civil War, and that's probably one reason why it was so bloody and costly. Besides, I mean, it being
Yeah.
very modern and trying to utilize the concepts of old with modern technology is going to be very stupid. You're going to cause a lot
Yeah.
of death, destruction. But the Rothschilds and Nathan Rothschild, for this matter, took advantage. He had his connections throughout Europe. They and they gathered their connections, their influence, their finances. They imploded the banks. They and as the value of each asset depleted and everybody began to sell off, they took advantage, they bought it all.
Yeah.
The Battle of Waterloo, I mean, the Rothschilds had their agents, their spies, um, got the intel first to them that Wellington had defeated Napoleon,
Yeah.
well before the British public would know, and so they kept this a secret. They took it to the exchange. They let it loose publicly that Napoleon was going to win the battle. The stocks dropped, and as everybody was panicking and selling off, and I mean as much as they can, imploding the market, that's where they swooped in. They bought all the assets. Word gets out. Oh, wait, Wellington won. Wellington and the Allies won.
Yeah.
And now what do you have? You have a consolidation of power on the financial market. I mean, and you have the stock rising. And who do you think? What do you think that the Rothschilds are going to do? They're going to sell off a portion of those assets, accumulate wealth, and look at the British Parliament and the King and say, "What are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
We own you."
Yeah.
And that's essentially where the pound sterling ended up becoming the inflated currency, the inflated fiat currency controlled by the Rothschilds and the financial and economic sector of the mercantilistic British Empire, uh, grew out of the wake or yeah, the wake of the Napoleonic days of Europe. And from that point on, Britain, because of the backing of the Bank of England and the Rothschild influence, the consolidation of power, their empire flourished. And they
Yeah.
had lost so much. I mean, realistically, I mean, after losing the colonies and basically being pimp smacked by a bunch of colonists,
Yeah. Then
I
what else are
mean,
you gonna put it?
yeah,
They
I
they
mean,
got bitch
really.
slapped.
I mean, don't be wrong. France had everything to do with that, but they got back at France. They restored order for the most part in Europe. France was the French monarchy was brought back. I mean, there would be times where the government of France would shift, and it would go from like a constitutional monarchy to an absolute monarchy, like with Napoleon III, and of course the second French Empire, I believe, would be in about the time of the American Civil War, where France actually expanded into Mexico and was able to seize hold of Mexico in about 1863, I believe, something like that. Um, they took advantage by taking advantage of yet another revolution in Mexico, because Mexico's just always been in dire straits. Well, I mean, the peasants have
Not the
always
band.
revolted. Yeah, so but I mean, but the order was restored, and the old world was maintained, and the British Empire was able to skate by and control the world.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for the Rothschilds consolidating their power and their influence with the Bank of England, the London Stock Exchange, through their lies, their deceit, and their early intel, I mean, it'd probably be a different story.
Well,
So it
that's
probably would have been a different story if Napoleon was able to win. But I mean, by that point, his armies were a little weak. He had just regained his glory and his power and got back to France from what was the where was the first Alba? The got back from his first exile on the
yeah,
island of Alba, and but they were weak, and the armies of Europe, specifically the British, they knew his tactics already, and the French army was just it was just too decentralized for the most
yeah,
part, unlike the prior coalition wars of the earlier decade where
yeah.
you had extreme French and French control by Napoleon Bonaparte. But is it Napoleon Bonaparte? I don't know. I don't care.
Who knows? When I
Who
hear to cut
knows?
promos on Napoleon.
Hmm.
So no, thanks for the history lesson. I was just, seeing that to reference Sal the Agorist episode where he's talking about exchange media and the strategy of agorism.
Hmm.
Um, but I can
So,
see
but
you had
that,
quite,
that is,
quite a lot to say.
mhm. But that's where it goes. Like back to Sal and his exchange to media. I mean,
Yeah,
that was essentially what the Rothschild family did. What Nathan Rothschild did was he utilized the Battle of Wellington, or the Battle of Waterloo, the Duke of Wellington's victory, as a means of total domination of the financial sector and creating a world reserve controlled by one family.
quicksand,
And
financial
yeah,
quicksand, drawing
ex
everybody in and being
hmm
forced to capitulate to their power, their financial strength and power.
yeah. And most of Europe, I mean, all business in Europe was done by the pound sterling.
Yeah,
The provinces, territories of the British Empire, pound sterling. The I mean, all business was conducted. It all started with Britain. It's like the dollar and the Federal Reserve in the 20th century, and that's where things change with the because the British Empire was waning, and especially after World War One hit, and then definitely after World War Two. But the whole point of the Federal Reserve set up in 1913 was the realization that something was going to hit big, whether artificial or not, artificially created or not. The Balkans were imploding.
yeah.
World War One was going to happen regardless of some. I mean, the bankers were gearing up. They needed a new superpower. They needed a new medium of exchange, a new currency reserve, and a new global superpower that could consolidate and reach the peak of all. And what better than the rising economic global power since their world stage takeover,
Debut.
beating the Spanish, beating the piss out of the Spanish in 8 months, out of Cuba, taking being handed the Philippines. Of course, they would have their own issues for about 10 years about fighting the Filipinos, Filipino revolutionary guerrilla fighters. Yep, guess what? Yeah, we got our asses. We always get our asses kicked in the jungle.
Yeah.
Whether it's the Philippines in
Welcome
the
to the jungle,
1900s,
baby.
yeah, welcome to the jungle. Whether it's taking over the French when the French gave us Vietnam, essentially. I mean, Indochina. I mean, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We get our asses kicked by guerrilla fighters. We can't fight wars. We never have been able to fight. We got our asses kicked during the Indian Wars. Ever heard of the
Yeah.
Battle of Little Bighorn? Of
Yeah.
course. Yeah, the Seventh Cavalry Division was slaughtered. And
Yeah.
no, it wasn't because they forgot the Gatling. Custer said, "Fuck the Gatling guns." First off, he left half of his artillery so they could move faster. They did leave the Gatling guns because it's heavy. They had very few artillery, but honestly, Custer really wasn't a great commander when it come to large scale divisions. He was a good cavalry. I mean, he had tremendous cavalry success during the Civil War as a colonel, but he didn't deserve to be a general. They got smashed at the Battle of Little Bighorn. That tells you about the American military. The only successful war that we ever had was Mexico, of course, and our own war against ourselves, and that's
Yeah.
because we're fighting ourselves.
Well, you know, the whole thing of Mexican American War is because one soldier got killed by accident, and they thought that was an extreme, you know. No, we
Oh,
can't let that. We can't let that happen. You had to apologize, and they're gonna apologize. So we're gonna kick your ass and take your name.
oh
So
yeah, yeah. Finally, the reason that going to that point, the reason for that excursion that occurred and that one soldier dying was Texas
one
finally got their
soldier led to
one
a huge war
war. Yeah.
over
Well,
nothing. I mean,
I mean, yeah,
obviously,
yeah. Well, I
but
mean, Polk was very expansionist. He believed in manifest destiny. Texas was vying for annexation since they won their independence. They finally were able to get annexed and brought into the Union in about 1845. And but there was a dispute with the border. Now Texas and the United States now demanded that the border with Mexico was the Rio Grande. The Mexicans said, no, 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 hold up. No, we're not giving you this much swath of land. I believe, what was the river's name just to the north? The Natchez, I believe. I might be
mm,
butchering the name. But
I
anyways,
don't
the
know. I don't
Mexic
speak Italian.
yeah, I don't speak Italian either.
That's an inside
So
joke between me and him.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. So but the so Mexico basically said, well, we're going to go maintain our border. They crossed the Rio Grande, where the Americans look out. I'm like, oh shit, we're being attacked. Next thing you know, firing a gunfight ensues. One soldier on the American side dies. I don't know how many Mexican soldiers were probably gunned down. I'm quite sure there was more Mexicans dead. I'm sorry, but there were Mexicans dead. But one American soldier, the fact that the Mexicans crossed the disputed Rio Grande because they disputed the border, and next thing you know, Congress declares war, and we're starting a blockade in the Gulf of Mexico. And Winfield Scott comes up. Well, actually, his strategy was brilliant. And he would utilize it. He would utilize the Anaconda strategy as the Secretary of what was he? Was he the Secretary of the Navy,
I
or
don't
was he
know.
this? I forget.
You've
But
always been
anyways,
good with history,
yeah,
like this kind of
yeah.
thing. I've always
So,
think it was
but he would,
interesting, important.
essentially he would use the same Anaconda strategy for the blockade of the South during the Civil War. But and it was basically like and it was almost like an island hopping scheme. And of course, you would have your invasion force to the north coming from the north and the northeast into Mexico and the southwest, and eventually into Mexico, California, Arizona, to northern, what is now northern Mexico. And you would have the blockade of the Gulf of Mexico, the naval landing, the amphibious assault uh, on the Gulf of Mexico, the Yucatan coast, and then they would go from there. And it was essentially like almost like island. They would go from one city to the next, like as they're laying siege. But one soldier in a border dispute, and that
Yeah,
led to one soldier's death, and then a president and a war hawking Congress that has this manifest destiny notion that we have to expand westward towards the Pacific, led to a war with Mexico, who we were going to defeat, even if, I mean, they didn't have the military might or the resources that the United States had.
yeah.
But it gave us the entire American Southwest. So I mean, it gave us
Can
more
you really
history.
complain?
So I
More
mean, we
tax
can't
money.
more tax money for the federal government.
Wait, I can complain about that.
Yeah, I mean, so but that goes to show, like, the fact is this rising from Mexico to coming out unscathed and reunited after the Civil War and Reconstruction, to the incoming surgence into the world stage with the Spanish American War, and then of course the global economic impact of our capitalistic influence with stateside, the innovation of our capitalism, which obviously you could argue if it was capitalism anyways,
Yeah.
it was more
Hey,
corporate.
there's not a free
Yeah.
market in money. There's not a free market, so it wasn't really. It's just a flavor of socialism.
Hmm. Hmm. But
So
that, I mean, so that's why the Federal Reserve was essentially customized,
yeah,
and they knew that the new order was about to begin, because the older order in Europe and the British Empire and the French influence as well was going to be, it was going to drop.
yeah,
So they knew the Great War was going to occur. They probably most assuredly artificially uh began the Great War at an earlier time, but there was going to be war in Europe, whether it was going to be 1914, or if it would have started in 1920. It was going to start
yeah.
within a decade, since the inception of the Federal Reserve, uh, that was negotiated in secret on Jekyll Island in 1908.
See, this is why agorism is important. It's because when the state has complete monopoly on money supply, they can launch a military operation whenever they want to,
Hmm.
and they don't even have to do it directly. They can do it covertly, like they're doing in Serbia or where Ukraine right now. Sorry, not Serbia, Ukraine.
Well, I mean, we were in
Yeah,
Serbia as well. I
yeah,
mean, with the Kosovo and the Bosnian War in
yeah,
the
yeah,
90s.
yeah.
So, yeah,
But
and NATO is disgusting.
yeah, so like with agorism, you inverse the quicksand so that they can't commit to those kind of violent atrocities and make it
Hmm.
a historic event.
Hmm.
Um, who was it? It was I'm trying to remember the name of that one actor. Larkin Rose. He's not afraid of the
Like,
Poles or the Stalins or the Hitlers. He's afraid of the people who are hallucinating, these people into power, and they use
hmm.
that power through the financial system. You know, people give their consent through voting so that
Hmm.
we can go to war. You know,
Yeah,
it's it's covert consent to violence.
yeah, and that's where you hit the nail on the coffin, and that's where, like, going
Nice.
back to our interview with Sal, and the concept of finding an alternate medium of exchange that's
Yeah. And
competitive,
it's not just
can be
one. We need multiple.
multiple. That's where crypto of any sort comes to play, especially if it's Monero or Zcash, or Bitcoin Cash, especially Bitcoin Cash, that is
Yeah.
constantly being forked and maneuvered and evolved into different segments. Because, I mean, once you get a centralized platform, you don't you're going to have those that want to divert and create another segment that actually is the vision of Satoshi Nakamoto, and that is
Yeah.
a medium of exchange that counters the federal government, counters the Federal Reserve, and basically puts the dollar in check and say, hey, I mean, you can finance just about anything in a more peaceful, voluntary means that is
Yeah.
very competitive, and we don't need to constantly be taxing and spending and putting ourselves into a deficit for war and welfare. I
Yeah.
mean,
Roger Ver put it that, cryptocurrency, at least I'm pretty sure it was Roger Ver. He said cryptocurrency brings law and order to the internet. Well, yeah,
it
that's
was.
true. And when we had before the internet, when we had financial stability through the gold standard, that kind
Hmm.
of brought law and order to the offline world before the internet and everything.
Hmm.
But at the same time, that was only so much as they could budget.
Yeah.
We needed
And
to
and
their ability to consolidate and budget for large
yeah,
groups of people away. That's
yeah.
what crypto
And,
does.
and the problem with gold, and don't get me wrong, like, those that I get it, it's sound, on a physical sense. It's very difficult to mine, because you really have to find those segments, those veins within the Earth's core, and
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, it takes hard work, and so, and it's a precious metal, and the value of it is the work that is utilized in order to attain that wealth and the gold. But the problem with gold, the problem with it as a reserve, backing, especially at this point, is that the government and wealthy shareholders within gold, especially with the families, the 13 families to be exact, they hold the monopoly over the gold supply. And it
Yeah,
all started when FDR implemented those policies by robbing the people of their own gold and forcing them to hand it over to the government for protection. And that's how you get
yeah.
Fort Knox, the gold armory.
Racket.
Yeah, it is. It's a racket. I mean, it's
Yeah,
almost like they learned from the rise of organized crime with prohibition and how the mafia operates, though it wasn't the mafia at that point, how the mafia operates. They took that segment, they took this Machiavellian idea
strategy.
yeah, and they created a racket. They stole from the people and they consolidated the power and the influence, and so that's where gold cannot be the reserve that we fall back on. I
Yeah.
mean, it's great to hold on to your own, to have your own holdings in gold. That's fantastic. I'm all for it. Competition is key. If you don't want to get into crypto, utilize gold, utilize fucking bottle caps for all I care. I don't care. Anything can be of value as long as you perceive it to be value, and as long as somebody's going to take it as a form of exchange for that product. If you can get people to voluntarily agree,
Yeah.
cool. That's awesome. I mean,
Well,
you could fucking have dry cow patties as your exchange. I don't care.
anything's, anything's better than a Federal Reserve note. That's why I'd rather prefer to use Dogecoin to buy movie tickets than a Federal Reserve note at a movie.
Even though Dogecoin obviously was a
Oh,
joke and
well,
it's very inflationary. So I
yeah.
mean, it drops and it rises with
It doesn't
the
inflate as
yeah.
quickly as a dollar does
It
because,
it's
you know,
yeah.
we already have a central bank digital currency. They're just creating a different name for
Yeah, yeah.
it.
So yeah, but I mean that's basically it. Like that's the whole brilliance of the crypto market is you have multiple sources, Dogecoin, even Dragon Coin, Disney's thing. I
Yeah,
mean,
but it's not. They're not owned by Disney. It was just.
well,
It was as an
it was
experiment that
imp.
started Disney.
Yeah,
I don't want to get in trouble with that one. They're
yeah,
they're very
yeah.
particular about that. So, but yeah, like I said, we were
Hmm.
just discussing what our favorite segments were from
Hmm.
the last couple episodes we had so far. It's been on YouTube, as well as some of the stuff that's happened exclusively on, you know, uh, Anchor. Sorry.
Hmm.
So, but I don't know. Hopefully, we can have a good program continuing to develop with everybody, and we get
Hmm.
more guests, and we appreciate everybody that listened. So don't
And
forget.
and
Sorry.
and don't miss next week, regardless of your opinion. We will be going over with the author of Pullout, Man, Mutiny,
Marlon.
and Modern Life,
Yeah.
Arvin
Vorha.
Vahora. So we are in the works of that. And honestly, I'm really hoping that I can get in contact with some. I plan on this week calling them back, but I'm really hoping I can get with the communication director Thomas Massey, because I think that would be really cool. Get a politician's perspective,
Yeah.
even though we're anti-political. I mean, I like Massey, honestly. I mean, I just don't agree with the pathway of going into politics. So if we can make that happen, dude, I mean, it means it's a step forward. So, but first, Arvin, and we were gonna have him on this week, but we ended up deciding to do a shorter segment
Yeah.
because
Shit
I'm
happens.
shit happens. So we just weren't on the same page.
Yeah.
So and some scheduling conflicts came in, and we had to postpone. So or Andrew had to postpone. So but
I
hopefully, I
I could
also
have did it, but I wouldn't want to do it without my podcast partner. So
hmm
he read the book too. I'd like to hear what he has to say.
exactly. And then I like to call out the great Dave Smith. Answer my goddamn direct message, asshole. I want you on this program. I want to pick your brain. Come on, Dave. Come on down.
Let's
You
go,
probably
Dave.
won't.
Let's go, Dave.
You probably won't
Thanks,
even
Dave
find this
Smith.
shit.
Thanks, Dave Smith.
You probably won't even find us on YouTube or anything, but you know what? If you do, uh, you know what? Everybody tweet this. Tweet to anybody that follows me or Andrew. Retweet this when this gets posted,
Yeah,
and retweet it directly to Dave Smith and tell him to go straight to the end because I'm calling him out.
yeah.
I want, yeah. What is it? Well, yeah. Why privatize the parks to kick out all the homeless? Why, Dave? What is your problem with homeless people? It's not their fault that they're home. Well, maybe it is their fault a little bit, but they chose that way,
Yeah.
didn't they? Or did the federal government or the state governments choose it for them with this godforsaken Federal Reserve and these Federal Reserve notes?
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us. Like I said, this has been a short segment this week. Check us out on Hunter Biden's Crack House on Telegram, at AI Conan 9 on Twitter. I should be on there more than I am. Buckeye Zach here is on there a lot more than I am. I'm mostly on Facebook. So, speaking of Facebook, we do have a page now. I need to
uh, yeah, that got suspended already.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
well.
I don't know. I don't even know. Like they said something about what was the reason? Oh, you weren't visible to people. I'm like, I I don't know how to navigate Facebook. Like
Yeah,
how what? Uh,
yeah,
you can toggle invisible?
yeah.
First
So,
off, who cares?
yeah,
Oh my God, dude, I believe in the deep state truly now.
yeah. So,
It's a CIA, Facebook is a CIA operation,
yeah, yeah,
and Twitter is the KGB,
yeah.
or
What
is
was
it
the
the
handle
FBI?
on Twitter there?
My hand. Oh, speaking of Twitter, at legacy_Zak. That is legacy_ZAK. I would troll a lot more, but I was in timeout recently for about a week, so
Yeah, you
I'm
gotta
just
be
gonna
careful.
stick to being careful. Mark it out. You can send either of us a DM if you want to just discuss or shit talk. It doesn't matter. Or hell, we'll bring you on the podcast. But to we're running completely out of time, and just to finish out, we're looking for big things right now. We're trying our damnedest to get some more guests on, and like I said, this is also another call out, another shout out. Would love to have Ezra come back on. Love to have Sal come back on. We will work on doing that because fantastic conversations with both of them. And as far as trying to get hopefully maybe Massey or maybe Dave Smith, which we probably won't, but you never know. Be positive. We're
Yeah,
also hoping to work out something about getting David Friedman on,
yeah,
the legendary Dave Friedman, the other Dave. So
it's a day that
any
matters.
the Dave that matters, the son of a legendary economist that neither of us agree with because we are Rothbardian, not Friedman.
We're not a bunch of
But
socialists.
we're not a bunch of socialists like Ludwig von Mises would say. Uh, uh, we agree with some aspects of Milton Friedman, and same with F.I. Hayek. But when it comes down to it, if you're a compromiser, you're a socialist.
Yeah.
Any more to say, Andrew?
I'm not an ignorant little Jewish girl.
Yeah, that died and suffered and lived off of welfare till her death. Sad, really. That really is sad for Miss Rand. She died penniless and on welfare.
Yeah,
Great points, but ended up living off the system.
yeah.
Yeah, so
Oh, well.
sorry. Oh well, that's why we hate minarchy.
Well, until next time, thanks for joining us.
Peace.
See ya.